I'm Zach Childs, and welcome to the Truetone Lounge. Today, our guest is our friend J.D. Simo.
How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good.
I'm honored to be back. Thank you for having me.
It's good to be back.
See, folks, we haven't caught up in a long time, so Zach is multitasking here, where it's like we haven't caught up in months, so it's like...
Yeah.
So actually, you know, this is one of my best friends on the planet, so actually... Unlike the last time where he pretty much knew everything I was going to say, this time he's actually going to be like y'all and hear some stuff for the first time. So kudos to you for multitasking. You're more together of a cat than I am.
Yeah, well, you got to try.
Well, thanks for having me, though. It's a pleasure to be back.
You're very welcome. Thanks for coming back out. So I was, in the last couple months, your last record you made, Rise and Shine, was a little more, experimental. had some kind of late '60s Isaac Hayes kind of influence and such, and then you played me some tracks off this new blues album, and it's very traditional Chicago blues, playing a Strat, playing Lightnin Hopkins and different things. Yeah. I love it. Tell me about this kind of switch or change in direction.
Well, everything's just an evolution, as you know, and what happened was we got back from winter tour right before the first of the year, and we were going to take a couple of months off of touring, which is not normal for us, because I was going to go and do a solo tour with Tom Emmanuel, which I did in January.
Yeah.
Which was a hell of a lot of fun. And it's actually, I can talk about it for a bit because that tour in particular is the first time that I've ever stepped out on stage alone ever in my life.
So you didn't have a band, it was just you.
It was just me. And, I knew, of course, almost a year in advance that I was going to do, because Tommy graciously invited me to come out and do this stretch of dates with him. And I'd guested on his Accomplice One record, which came out a few months ago, which is a great record, and it was a huge honor to be asked, to be on that record. So I knew it was coming, but you know how things are. You go on with life, and you're busy, and you're doing this and you're doing that, and it's like in the back of my mind, I'm like, you got that solo tour with Tommy. And all of a sudden it's going to be here. And so I had thought about it. But of course, I get home right before Christmas and it's like, oh, I leave in 2 weeks and I got to figure out I got to come up with a show,
Yeah.
So, so I spent, a couple of weeks working on it, figuring out how I would do it. And I ended up doing it partially electric and partially acoustic. For my portion, my set alone. Obviously, when I came out for the encores with Tommy, it changed every night because we did something different almost every night of the tour, just whatever he was feeling like or we were feeling like or whatever. But I went out and I did that tour, and I just had such a great time because I just did whatever what felt good to me. And I know that, it's not like I didn't have fun playing with my band and all that kind of stuff, but, there were different opinions and obviously it's something's not going to always be the best if everybody isn't all into it. And trying to get all people into the same thing is difficult at times. So henceforth, there were times where, I would set stuff aside because not everybody in the group was into it, And so I came back from that Tommy tour, and I had played a whole bunch of stuff that I'd always wanted to do, you know, because I love Lightnin Hopkins, and I love, you know, obviously, you know, part of your and my bond going way back as friends is, you know, Black American music and the historical, knowing where stuff comes from and all that. And so I started cutting when I got back, not with anything in mind, but just knowing, just for fun, really. And so I was just having the drummer in the band, Adam, come over to the house, and we cut like, you know, 30 some odd songs, you know, and about halfway through that process, we cut like a dozen or so songs. And then we left to go on tour in March and April. And at that point, like, I looked at what we had done, and I'm like, well, geez, you know, this is a blues record, you know. Like, I hadn't set out to do that, but, like, the stuff that I liked the most was pretty old school. And so I came back from that tour with that kind of, like, just embracing it, being like, well, this isn't going to be a Simo record. This is going to be a solo record. And it's going to be what I want to do, you know. And so, purely, you know, and so then we cut, you know, as many or more tracks when we got back from that tour. And I would, for the majority of the record, some of it I played everything on, which was really fun. But majority of it was just guitar and drums, and then I'd go back and play bass, or I'd go back and play bass and play piano, or whatever. And so I just got to where I really liked it, you know. And so that's right now I'm about to leave for a long tour, opening for our friends Big Head Todd and the Monsters and the Dirty Dozen Brass Band. And this is like the first tour where we're doing that whole thing where like half the gig is upright bass and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But that's kind of, you know, that's the overview. I know I'm jumping ahead, but that's kind of...
Yeah, because, you know, of course, in our day, you know, when you say blues, it can be a lot of different things.
This is very important, folks.
So you could be talking about blues rock with, you know, a lot of high gain and synthesizers,
No.
or you know, this is traditional blues. This is upright bass. This is, you know.
This is
clean.
This is, you know, for me. You know, I mean, you know, I like a lot of different music, as do you, you know, but when it comes to one of my biggest pet peeves in the world, and one of the reasons why when my group formed and we made our first couple records, is, you know, I very purposely was like, we're playing rock music.
Yeah.
You know, people would call it bluesy or whatever, but like I always shied away from that because I actually don't like when rock and blues necessarily kind of cross.
Yeah.
I like traditional blues for what it is, and I like rock music for what it is. And you know, obviously, sometimes when those two things have crossed in a very natural, you know, older kind of way, I've definitely been heavily influenced and love all that stuff. But in the modern era, I'm not a fan. I mean, if you know, people can like what they like, and that's fine, you know. But no, for me, I really love Lightnin Hopkins, and I really and always have, and just played for myself. You know that because you know me. But like, I never played it publicly, but I love Lightnin Hopkins a lot, and so there's that, and then, you know, I always tell this story. When I was 18. You know, because I call it stratoblasting up to that point, which is, you know, being into the Stevie Ray and the Hendrix, which is cool, man. You know, I mean, you know, I got nothing but love and respect, and had huge parts of my, you know, formative years of playing being incredibly, incredibly influenced by Jimi Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan. But it's what's kind of come in the wake of that I think is just kind of, you know, you're better off going backward than forward with that kind of stuff. And but when I was 18 years old, I heard the first Fabulous Thunderbirds record, Girls Go Wild, and heard Jimmie. Mm-hmm. And since then, Jimmie has always been just one of my biggest, and I've talked about Michael Bloomfield as well. Same thing happened. That's right around the time I heard the first Butterfield, or the second, but I heard East West first.
Yeah.
And so, to me, unless you're talking about, Ike Turner or Magic Sam or Freddie King or Earl Hooker, who's a huge influence on me as well. Unless you're talking about those guys, Pee Wee Crayton, T-Bone Walker, B.B. King, whatever. To me, the next generation, if you will, it's like you got Bloomfield and you got Jimmie Vaughan, and Anson Funderburgh.
And just to qualify, Jimmie Vaughan, a lot of people, when they think about Jimmie Vaughan, they think about the Tough Enough era, T-Birds, and which is fine.
Yeah.
But when you listen to, Girls Go Wild, not to be confused with Girls Gone Wild or Girls with Low Self-Esteem, that's another thing altogether.
Yeah.
But when you listen, I mean, that is a pure gut bucket blues record.
That's as real as it gets, and I mean, that original band, it was a magic thing, just like the Butterfield band when Bloomers was in the band. I don't think it's ever been done better as far as where they were playing it authentically, but they were not. They were being themselves doing it. They were playing heartfelt, and they were really they weren't copying.
Right. There wasn't mimicry.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, there was service being done.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. But it was real, and also, I mean, I'm a fan of anything Jimmy's ever done. I mean, I love all his solo records, and especially the stuff, that organ trio record he put out this year is one of my. I just love it, and so yeah. When I'm saying blues, like that's where I'm coming from, and I think that's sorely kind of. I had this Luther Dickinson and I have become really, really good buddies from the North Mississippi All-Stars, and Luther actually guests on the record, and I've never been a person that liked having guests or doing the whole, I had a guest on my record or something.
Yeah.
Luther and I are like, we're peas in a pod, man, and we're actually doing the Phil Lesh thing together. But he and I were having a conversation fairly recently, like in the last during this whole process, and just talking about the historical lineage of these repertoires of this music that is very regional and very American. That for him, the older he gets, the more kind of in debt to where he's from, because he's from North Mississippi, and obviously Jim Dickinson, his father, is a hugely important figure in American music and popular music. But like him talking about the music of that area, Junior Kimbrough and all the Memphis music and all the stuff that makes up his thing, and how he's like, man, he's like, they're all passing away, or they all have passed away, and he feels a great service to represent that repertoire, and that he always is he talks, and I dig the way he talks about it, because he's like, it's the repertoire, man. Like, the people come and go, but it's the repertoire that has to, like, keep going.
Yeah, the songs,
the feeling. And so for me, being born and raised in Chicago, and me in my life having, sort of a reconnection with my family, and where my family on both sides come from, very poor working class people, I feel the same thing for where I'm from, and for me personally, I'm very drawn to the guitar players, the music in general, but specifically as a guitarist, like the guitar players that were the West Side guys in Chicago, guys like Magic Sam and guys like Buddy Guy early on, and Otis Rush, and stuff like that. I'm very drawn to it.
So you've dropped some names here, and let's get specific on, like, okay, Lightnin Hopkins. Okay, somebody wants to learn about Lightnin Hopkins. So what would be an album or something that you would recommend for a viewer to check out?
My favorite Lightnin Hopkins record is is a record called Lightning Strikes, because that was one of the first ones that I ever got. The beauty of YouTube, man, is just punch it in YouTube, man.
Yeah, I mean,
just,
you can
just punch him in, because his most famous, like, the YouTube everybody will find right away is him doing Mojo Hand.
Yeah.
And the thing about Lightnin Hopkins is, he played with a thumb pick, he played acoustic, but he played like Jimmy Reed, is, which actually that's not really Jimmy Reed. That's a guy named Eddie Taylor, who Eddie Taylor was from Chicago, and Eddie Taylor played not only with Jimmy Reed, but he played with John Lee Hooker. He played on a lot of John Lee Hooker records on VJ Records because it's the same record label.
Yeah.
But Eddie Taylor, like that, which is the hallmark of American music, that's Eddie Taylor. And Eddie Taylor was sort of older than everybody else. So, like Freddie King, when he lived in Chicago in the 50s and couldn't get a record contract, Freddie King learned to play guitar by being taught sort of by Eddie Taylor.
Yeah.
And also Earl Hooker, who was, I mentioned earlier, and Earl, was another guy who never really kind of got his due,
Right.
But anyway, getting back to Lightnin Hopkins, so, there's Jimmy Reed, that. So Lightnin Hopkins, I don't know if he was the first, but I mean, he's one of the first famous ones to like do a shuffle. So that's kind of like in the style of Lightnin Hopkins. Is very, it's very greasy, and it's something that I really, really love. But that kind of shuffle beat was something that he used a lot. And he played by himself a lot, so he had this really beautiful sense of time that like John Lee Hooker also kind of had. Yeah. I could go on and on. Yeah.
So. You have the Lightnin Hopkins thing, which he was kind of famous for playing acoustics with a sound hole pickup and running it through an amp. And so, on some of the albums, he might have played electric guitar
later on.
But a lot of it was that DeArmond sound hole pickup and the Gibson or some other kind of acoustic. So then you talked about Jimmie Vaughan. So what would be? I mean, of course, you were. Kind of indicating that you loved everything. But if you were to recommend like one or two things of Jimmie Vaughan for someone to really get an idea of Jimmie Vaughan's playing.
Well, that first Fabulous Thunderbirds record that came out in like 78 or 79, I think, called Girls Go Wild, because it is just, I mean, he's like 20, he might be 30, close to 30 when he made that record. Anyway, I mean, it's just the real thing. I mean, it's just the amalgam of. Yeah. It's funny to me also because like Jimmie, especially now, he's adopted this amalgam of styles that were kind of regional to kind of South Texas and the Gulf. Playing with the capo like Gatemouth Brown and Johnny Guitar Watson and that kind of thing. But back in those days, back in the early Thunderbirds days, it really is all that stuff I mentioned about like the West Side Chicago players. He's kind of like that perfect amalgam of all those guys. There's definitely some B.B. King and there's some Freddie King in there, but there's a lot of Magic Sam and Otis Rush and Pee Wee Crayton and all that kind of, Ike Turner. I love Ike Turner. That's another guy. I mean, he wasn't a Chicago guy. He was in Memphis, but all that stuff. So anyway, I mean, I'd say the first Thunderbird record, and then this last organ trio record, the Jimmie Vaughan trio record that just came out, is just really great because I think that it's funny because he's had like two different styles. Jimmie, he had like the Thunderbird style, and then like when he made his first solo record in the early '90s, he put the capo on and he started playing. It still is connected to the way he played before, but like he's developed this other thing that now, 20 years later, has developed into this whole other amalgam where it's like there's a bit of Barney Kessel, there's a bit of Kenny Burrell, there's a bit of there's that stuff mixed with the Clarence Gatemouth Brown, all that kind of stuff, you know. And I just think, I mean, I could gush all about him. I just, for my money, I just think that, you know, like, he is still out there playing, and it's like, that's the real thing, you know. And it's in a way, it's almost, I was gonna say, like, unfortunate that he's Stevie Ray Vaughan's brother. I mean, that, I don't mean that at all, but what I mean is, like, you know, Jimmie is such an important player that the fact that he's Stevie's brother, it almost, I mean, it's like, it matters, but it's like, there's, you know, if that's how you find him and then you fall in love with him, great, you know. Yeah. And I understand that, like, you know, I say, people ask me all the time, they're like, well, who's your favorite guitar player? And I say, well, you know, probably Jimmie Vaughan or something. And some people are totally, and they're like, yeah, and then some people are like, really? You know? And I get it, that it's kind of an acquired taste, you know? Whereas, you know, Stevie was flashier and just as soulful, like, completely just as soulful, just as heartfelt. But it's more, I think what Stevie does is more accessible, you know? And Jimmie, it's a little grittier, it's a little funkier, it's a little, and I don't mean that he's funkier than his brother. I mean, it's just, it's different. It's more, it's an acquired taste. You know, just like Ike Turner, or just like any of these old guys are. Yeah. It's not for everybody, you know.
You've always been kind of listening to these guys, but then it just kind of welled up in you, and then you kind of and you made this record that again is more of a, you know, traditional, you know, blues record. Yeah. And it's cool that you're, you know, you've changed, you know, your sound somewhat, and you know, you're using upright bass, and you've changed, you know, instrumentation. So, you know, you've kind of, you know, you've got a Strat here, which I haven't seen you play a Strat in many years.
15 years probably. Yeah. This was actually a buddy of mine. Well, I made part of the record I made with Red, my 335. It's still my favorite. You know, like, that thing's like an appendage on me. Yeah. And I was gonna bring it, folks, but he was like, "Well, you brought it last time, and you're playing the Strat, so bring the Strat." So, but I've fallen in love with this. This actually was a buddy of mine's. Yeah. Who's actually a really good friend of Jimmie Vaughan and Anson, and this was his guitar, and I never had a Strat that did that sound, because in a way, and again, folks, like, I love Stevie Ray Vaughan, so don't, you know, like, I'm just trying to give as many disclaimers, but, like, the kind of Strat sound that I would want is like anti-Stevie. Like, that's not the sound that I'm looking for. I'm looking for something that's kind of that 50s style, that's a little clangier. It's a little less fundamental. It's a little it's not furrier, but fuzzier sounding. Like, the notes kind of blend into each other and kind of mess with each other harmonically. It's just a different kind of sound. So anyway, this was my buddy's guitar, and he had it, and I was like, man, I got to have that. And so he was gracious enough to let me have it, and I've just really grown really comfortable with it, because I'm playing essentially the same way that I used to. It's just now I have that sound, and it's funny because with Red I had it wired out of phase, or had Glazier put the pot in it to knock it out of phase. Yeah, so you had a push-pull pot so you could knock one of the pickups out of phase with each other. Right, and I use that sound a lot, because I like that sound, because it's like a sound that I'm not sick of hearing, okay? Yeah. And so the funny thing is that now with this, I'm playing the same way, essentially, but it's like, but this sound, again, is a sound that I'm not sick of hearing. It's that old school sound. Yeah. And it's, in a way, a bit more pleasing than the out-of-phase sound. It's a little more accessible. It's a little broader, you know? And I've just really gravitate towards it and really like it, and so I finished making the record with this, but yeah, you know, it's just all part of, I mean, it just, you know, I didn't plan it, it just happened, you know, it just kind of all happened naturally. And as far as, like, the building up and the Wellspring thing, you know, I'd always wanted to do it, but it never happened naturally. Like, I was just following the muse, and it's like it just kind of naturally happened. Like I said, I started cutting stuff just for my own pleasure. It wasn't, you know, for once I wasn't answering to anybody and didn't have really anyone's input, and that's what came out. And it's like, well, all right then, you know.
Very cool. Is that an ash or alder body?
It's an ash body, so it's like a 56 ash body, and then the neck is like a 58, and then the pickups are actually not old pickups. These are actually my buddy Ron Ellis, who's just a gentle soul. This is the second set of pickups he made, because the first set were good pickups, but they weren't what I was looking for, and I basically I gave him like a huge playlist of stuff, and it was actually really fun for me, because it was like, check this out, check this out, check this out.
Yeah. So what would be, you know, what were these tunes that, you know, if you were talking about ultimate, you know, kind of strat tones that you were looking for?
Oh man, you know, there's a whole bunch of Ike Turner stuff from the 50s, and I don't know if I sent these to him or not. I know I sent him like the first Anson Funderburgh record from 80 or 81, Talk to the Hand.
Okay.
And Anson has become a good friend.
Yeah.
And Anson's another big hero. I put him very in the same category as Jimmie, and he's even lesser lauded, but as important in my opinion in the world today.
Yeah.
But I think I sent him that, and obviously, you know, like Jimmie, the early Thunderbird stuff, you know, Girls Go Wild, the original I Can't Quit You with Otis Rush, you know, is like a really good middle pickup kind of sound, and all of that early. There's a record that is called Folk Festival of the Blues, and it also was issued. It was issued, I think, in Europe as Folk Festival of the Blues. I heard Jimmie Vaughan talk about this record, and it took me forever to figure out what record this was. It was released in Europe, I think, as Folk Festival of the Blues, and then it was released here in America on Chess as Big Bill's Live at the Copacabana, and it's Muddy Waters and Sonny Boy Williamson and Howlin' Wolf, and they're backed by probably a 20-some-year-old Buddy Guy. And it was the first record that was really, I don't know if it was Buddy's first record, but it was way before he made records of his own.
Yeah.
And that record is incredible, and I've figured out over time that the folk festival version of that record is what Clapton first heard of Buddy Guy and got all up. I was able to kind of connect the dots.
Yeah.
But then in the late 60s, Chess issued it like 6 years after it was released in Europe. And Jimmie and all the young guys, Anson, all those guys had that version of it.
Right.
And, you know, that's Buddy playing a 50 Strat into, I'm assuming, probably a basement or something. And it is just, most of his treble pickup, and it's just so good. I mean, it's just the best you've ever heard Buddy Guy. I mean, just old school. And he's backing Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf in their prime.
Right.
You know? And so I know I sent Ron that. You know, I'm pretty sure I did. And so he nailed it, though. He basically just made a dead nut 57, like 56, 57 set that are very microphonic, and they're very low output, and old stagger, and A5 magnets that are like old A5 magnets, and so all those things combined are kind of the antithesis of what you would want for like a Hendrix sound or a Stevie sound or something.
Right. Because you'd want higher output.
You want higher output. You want stronger fundamental.
Yeah.
You know.
And you don't want microphonic.
No, and you don't want microphonic because it's going to be a lot higher gain. You know, this is a very low gain situation. It's not clean, but it's cleaner. Yeah.
It's got the old three-way on there.
Yeah. I don't because I don't use the in between positions. Yeah. So I this is easier for me to be able to switch quickly because I don't because otherwise it might get hung up in the in between, and I don't want that.
Yeah.
So and nothing against it. It's just not what I want, and I do have the bridge pickup wired to this.
Okay.
And I use the tone controls a lot more on a Stratocaster. I've found because taking it off the neck pickup and playing jazzier, it really I like doing that, and then that being on the treble pickup is really useful because you really can get it to not sound like a Stratocaster.
Right.
It's pretty interesting, actually.
And so the other tone controls on the neck pickup?
Yeah, this one's on the neck pickup and that one's on the treble pickup,
And the
and
middle
that's
is
wide
on
open.
yeah. Right.
And I don't think this is even reverse wound either.
Okay.
Because I just wanted it to be old school. And I remember this has got an old cap in here too, an old .1, those square.
Yeah. The little phone book looking ones.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which actually, it's part of that sound.
Yeah.
Like a guitar like this, with pickups like that. Like that's part. And that's the other thing. Like I had started experimenting with pedals and all that kind of stuff, and I have fun with it. And then I just went, what the hell? Like it's just not me, man. I was doing it and I was having fun with it for a second. Yeah. But like this stuff is the stuff that feels comfortable to me, and then it's just let your hands do it,
Yeah. So again, you're back to straight into the amp. Mm-hmm. So you got the Strat today. You're using deluxe reverb and
yes, I got yours here this time because mine got stolen. I've heard about that. Right after we did the last one of these, we that's the first big tour I brought my old deluxe on, and the Italians got it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
The Italian job.
What are you gonna have? What are you gonna do, man? Stuff happens, folks. It's just stuff. You know, human life is a lot more important. But yes, I'm actually playing through yours, and it sounds really good.
And then live.
What you want for it? $100?
I'm holding on to that one.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
So, and then live, you've been using a super reverb?
Yeah, I've been using supers, and so I've got a couple of supers that I really like, and that's the only thing I used on this new record, just because it did what I wanted it to do. Yeah. But it's funny though, because I might experiment a little bit. I was telling you before we did this, I might end up getting a basement or something like that. Not that I'm not getting what I want out of the supers. I am, but it's just, again, like a lot of those sounds that I love, the Ike Turner records from the 50s and stuff like that. Like that's what they're using.
Tweed 410 basement.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I might go there next. I might not. I don't know. But yeah, just a chord and a super, and I set the supers way different than when I was just playing the Gibson. Because with the Gibson, I would always want to put solid state rectifiers in them. Yeah. And I would set them real bright. I would set them with the treble all the way up and the bright switch on and the bass almost off and all this stuff. And with a Stratocaster, it's a very different thing. Where now I've actually like set the supers up very different. Where I've got the tube rectifier back in there and I set them way different. I set the treble down quite a bit, like on 6 or 7, and middle about the same, and actually bass up to like 3 or 4, to get the kind of sound that I'm looking for.
Yeah, that kind of brings up an interesting, kind of topic. A lot of people don't think about the fact that, the electric guitar is really not a whole instrument without the amp.
Yeah.
And the amp and the guitar, the way they work together is so important, and you really have to dial things in differently. It doesn't work great when you take a Strat and plug it into an amp, dial it in, and then you just take a Gibson and don't change anything.
Yeah, I mean...
It doesn't tend to.
No, it doesn't tend to, and I think it all begins and ends with what it is that you're wanting to hear. And I think if you have a better conception of what it is that you're looking for, you have a better chance of finding it, you know. And so yeah, you know, and again, like, that's just me. That's just my preference. Everybody's different, and everybody's hands sound a little different. Some people have bright sounding hands. Some people have dark sounding hands. I mean, it just depends.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, you know, I just kind of that's kind of where I've ended up. And it's interesting because this guitar is so, you know, because I'm going from playing an old 335 that, like, will drive any amplifier, and this is incredibly not forgiving and weak, and it's fun, man, because it's like, it reminds me of back when I was in the club band with Don Kelly and I stopped using pedals, and it's like I heard the sound that I wanted, but I had to get my hands in shape.
Yeah.
And I had to, like, adjust from having that feeling of being propped up that, like, using compression and using delay and using overdrives and stuff gave me before. Now it's like going to a more unforgiving instrument, which I think Fenders generally are.
Yeah.
And having that much less power driving the amp, it's like I'm getting the sound that I'm wanting, but I'm definitely having to adjust a bit, and that's actually kind of fun for me because it reminds me of something that already happened to me once in my playing.
There's just a physicality to playing music, and there's an aspect of, just like, if you know, you have to keep yourself in shape, you have to keep your hands in shape, and you have to keep your chops up to be able to pull those sounds out, because you know, but especially, you know, not to, you know, heap too much praise on this, but just, you know, when you're plugging straight into the amp, you know, you don't have those other things, and so you have to have more, you know, control of your hands, and that comes from practicing and working at it.
It does indeed, and it's, you know, like I said, I mean, it's you know, if you're getting the sound, like, I think you have to let your ears guide you, because if you're getting the sound you want, you can compensate with the rest. You can adjust.
Yeah.
But if you're not getting the sound, then don't matter, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. So it's been really fun. But like I said, this has been really comfortable. I mean, it hasn't really. I've been aware of what I'm telling you, but I'm not. It hasn't been something that's been, like, debilitating in any way. And if anything, it's been like, oh man, I remember that feeling.
Yeah.
I remember when I had to work a little bit extra hard because I didn't have that little bit of extra, you know, cushion underneath me.
Yeah.
You know, so, but it's worth it because it's like, it's the sound that I'm wanting to hear.
Yeah.
You know.
Let's grab this ES-5.
Let's do that.
So tell me about this beautiful ES-5.
So,
I mean, it's gorgeous.
It's beautiful, man. So a lot of these guys, some of these guys I've already mentioned. Pee Wee Crayton is definitely one of them. You know, the ES-5 came out, and, you know, of course everybody wanted, you know, L5s and Super 400s and stuff, because that was the Cadillac guitar of the late 40s and the early 50s. These I think were, I could be wrong, but, you know, I think these were a little bit cheaper, and T-Bone Walker obviously played one, and Pee Wee Crayton played one, and B.B. King. My favorite B.B. King record is Singin' the Blues, which came out on Crown Records in '56 or something, and that's him playing an ES-5. That whole thing, that's pre-vibrato B.B. King.
Yeah, when he's playing straight notes.
He's playing like more like T-Bone Walker, and so he's playing an ES-5, and Lowell Folsom, who, you know, was another contemporary of T-Bone Walker from the 50s. He played an ES-5. And then move up a couple of generations, then you had, you know, in the 80s and the 90s, you know, you had guys like Ronnie Earl and guys like Anson Funderburgh and Kid Ramos and stuff like that played ES-5s for a handful of songs or something, in tribute to that. And so, anyway, I use this for two. One, I use it because there's just no way to get that kind of sound and it's also, it kind of serves double duty for me because there's one tune that we do now that like is the ES-5 kind of sound, but then there's one of those Lightnin Hopkins kind of things because obviously this being a big, basically an acoustic instrument, I can kind of. Sometimes I go back and forth. Like as we tour more, I'll make more of a decision. Sometimes I'll take my acoustic and plug it into the amp, like Lightnin would do.
Yeah, your Waterloo.
Yeah, my Waterloo, which I love. Or I'll use this, and I'll do a very similar thing where I'll play the Lightnin kind of style. But yeah, I just love this darn thing, and I'm a huge fan of them. So.
And part of the charm is one of the pickups out of phase.
Yeah, actually, I think two of them are out of phase. Actually, because I know these two are out of phase with each other, but I think this one is too. And so.
So put it on us.
So
lay it on.
Put it on you. It's a little. This is a little bit of a noisy instrument. Hold on a second. Sometimes you gotta. That's that kind of, T-Moan kind of thing. It's because of where we are, folks. This thing will, you got to point north, you know. But this has got a really strong bridge pickup.
You were talking about Jimmie Vaughan, and what would be some kind of Jimmie Vaughan isms, like on on the Strat,
Well, it's funny because for Jimmie, he's a weird amalgam because like that to me is kind of Jimmie-esque, but that's also kind of B.B. King. Early B.B. King.
Yeah.
And also a little Freddie King, so it's kind of, to me, they all kind of cross over.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not necessarily one or the other. Like, in a way, how Jimmie plays now, I think, is more like that's Jimmie Vaughan, and I don't play like that. You know, but like the old school Jimmie is more, like I'm saying, like that. To me, it's kind of like if you listen to 50s era B.B. King.
Yeah.
It's a lot of that, which 50s era B.B. King is so different from modern BB King.
Right.
What everybody thinks of. It's funny because I can't really do it because I don't want to do it. Like, that's not...
The fast vibrato.
What everybody thinks. And I actually kind of have avoided it because it's like the thing that is the more known. I don't know. I'm just more attracted to things generally that are maybe a little bit more eclectic. And so to me, that more kind of simplistic earlier BB style, which is kind of evolved T-Bone Walker style, that's got chromatics in it, you know. It's just more, it's more attracted to me. And so it's like what Jimmie did was very similar. Yeah. And they all kind of, it's funny because what I was about to say is about 50s era BB King. He really was like the first real guitar player that I think everybody copied. Yeah. You know? And so that's kind of the funny thing that it's like even Freddie King or any of these guys I'm talking about in Chicago, they all had a bit of that kind of 50s era BB King because I think he was so important just in the pantheon of guitar. It's just he was the guy everybody wanted to be like. So like that is kind of where it's really coming from, you know? And I don't know, I probably haven't done a great job at explaining it, but that's kind of what I'm thinking about, you know?
Early non-vibrato BB King.
Yeah, or slight vibrato.
Singing the Blues album.
Singing the Blues, and then there's another record that came out in 1960 or 61 that is Anson Funderburgh's favorite album of all time, which is called My Kind of Blues, and it's BB backed by the Lloyd Glenn Trio, which is just piano, bass, and drums.
Oh, wow.
And I swear to you, BB's playing a Stratocaster. Because you can hear it from the first note of the record. And there's photos of BB that a friend of mine found that where BB's got the right haircut for that era and he's playing a maple board Strat. Yeah. And I swear to God it's a Stratocaster. But that record is a really great record too. Yeah. And that anybody who's like a fan of Anson Funderburgh would be into that record. Yeah.
And that's not long before you get Live from the Regal.
It's not, but the difference is pretty big. Yeah. Because, again, this kind of stuff, and again, like, I don't know how to describe it, but it's, you know... So, I mean, it's close. Yeah. I mean, that's basically kind of Live at the Regal-esque, but I mean, it's like, it's not as fast vibrato, BB. Yeah. It's still like, there's vibrato, but it's not the hummingbird vibrato. Right. And I just love that sound. And all those guys, like I said, kind of have that amalgam, whether it's Jimmie Vaughan or whether it's Freddie King or Magic Sam or Eddie Taylor or Otis Rush, same thing, you know.
And you were using the bridge pickup earlier. Yeah. I mean, that is a great bridge pickup sound.
Thank you. That is totally the sound, though. Like that's that slightly microphonic 50s kind of sound where if you back it off, it almost sounds like a Gibson. You know, or for like there's that crazy record that if you back this off a little bit and pull the wang bar, you can do that Ike Turner. That's something that Ike Turner did, and I do that a lot now because that's like that's the only thing I use this for. Is doing the Ike Turner thing. Yeah,
that almost has like a 50s ray gun kind of.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. But it's like, that's Ike Turner did that.
Yeah.
On a couple of different albums back in the 50s, but like that's the only thing I use this for. And if he would play bridge pickup, but like through a basement or something, sort of dark, but it's like you can tell, because that's the thing about this kind of Stratocaster is you really like bridge pickup. Middle. They're all very distinctive sounding.
Yeah.
They don't, you know, they sound like they sound. And so in the middle pickup, a lot of guys use, if you get the amp driving a little bit, it's weird because they sound different from one another, but yet they all kind of have this hollow quality that again is just very not later era Stratocaster, you know.
Right.
And when you're playing low down on them, there's this clanky kind of thing. And a lot of these guys, some of them would overdrive their amps a lot, which I like, but there's that clean stuff, like Magic Sam. He would play bridge pickup real quiet. Not quite that quiet, but... he would play real quacky like that, and like Earl Hooker, I've got my slide here, like he would play like middle pickup quiet like that. As a slide player, I've always kind of struggled with, I've always been really influenced by lots of different slide players, but for some reason now, like I've always played in standard tuning. I've never been a big tuning slide guy. And so just really coming full circle kind of back around to Earl Hooker has really helped, me kind of feel more grounded, where I'm not thinking Duane Allman, I'm not thinking, I'm thinking Earl Hooker, and it's like already how I play slide makes sense with Earl Hooker because that's how he played slide. Yeah. And he was doing it 15 years before Duane Allman was doing it, which is just crazy, because people talk about Elmore James, and rightfully so, but it's like in the early 1950s, Earl Hooker was playing standard tuning slide, essentially playing whatever he could play without a slide with a slide. Yeah. In the early 50s, Yeah. And it's like, talk about a guy that nobody talks about when they should, Yeah. So, there's a track on the new record that's not an Earl. It's not Earl's song. It's my tune, but it's me kind of. It's just really helped. It's just really helped kind of focus because it's all kind of. I've gone through all the stuff, and it's just I'm having fun, and this is fun for me.
Yeah. One thing I wanted you to share with us is just maybe a playing concept or something that that really helped shape you musically, or really kind of helped you along with your playing.
I'd be glad to, and and I know this might bore some people, but man, having an assertive left hand or right hand if you're a left-handed player, obviously, but your fretting hand, having an assertive where you're grabbing the note for what it is, but you're not choking. It's really hard to describe. Where it's like you're fretting the note and you're playing it with authority, but at the same time, my hand is not clenched. I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
I'm not doing this. I'm not tense. I'm loose, but I'm doing it assertively. So much of getting a good sound starts with your freaking hands, man, and if you get a good sound just sitting here without the amplifier on and the volume off, like I'm sitting here and I'm getting the guitar to sustain and I'm hitting pitch and I'm not wavering and it's not fretting anymore, but it's like I have a hand strength that is firm and assertive and a vibrato that I've worked on over a long period of time where it's like I hit a note and I hit it and it's there.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to me how I travel all over the world and see all types of different people and how that basic building block of playing is like not present. It's scary to me. And I know why, I think. I think the reason why is that it's not sexy. It's not flashy. But man, you can put, it's just like anything. If you got your fundamentals right, you can pile anything you want on top of that, and it's going to be stable and it's going to be great, But it's like, but you got to crawl before you can walk, And I think a lot of people are, they skip ahead, steps, and consequently, I think that it makes it that much harder to have a style because you're not the way you develop a style. If you're going to develop a style, is you take a bit of this, as they say, take what you like and leave the rest,
Mm-hmm.
And so, for me, I just, I'm very conscious of it. And when I was playing in the Don Kelly band, I think I talked about this last time a little bit, where it's like when I left that band, I had all this dexterity. I had all this ability to play really fast and really complicated stuff, But I had sacrificed a bit of my ability to just get a good sound and play, just do something very, like I couldn't do this. I couldn't, I'm in A. And just get it to vibrate and just keep it, like I had to, and it doesn't take long. It'll take you a month or something like that.
Yeah.
But you can sit in front of the television and do this. And I recommend actually doing it without an amplifier. Because it's like if you can sit with a guitar, because that's the other thing. All these old timers, man, they would play, in the club, plug into whatever they could plug into, But it's like if they were sitting practicing or if they were trying to woodshed on something, they'd be sitting on a bed in a motel or something and just playing to themselves. Yeah. And it's like they weren't thinking about it. That's what they had, But it yields a better outcome because it's like, if you can get it to sound good like this,
unplugged,
yeah, where it's like I'm getting sustain and I'm getting a sound out of the guitar.
Mm-hmm. That's going to be amplified.
Well, yeah, and then it's only going to get better as you get that to work with, Yeah. But I mean, it's just something that fundamental basic building block of playing that I think is getting more and more and more lost as time goes on. And it's probably the thing that's the most important. And it's definitely the absolute first thing about how to get a good sound.
Yeah.
Because every person has a different touch, and it's like, and you can refine your touch. I think that you start with the touch you have, but you can refine it. And it's like, but that's where tone comes from. That's where your sound comes from. It starts and ends with you, you know? And so it's like, if you put the time in to really be able to get the most out of the instrument, then, you know, it's only going to get better as you use better equipment, or you use this or that, you know, whatever, you know,
Right.
to get exponentially better. But it's like, but if you're starting at a disadvantage, you know, then how can it ever get better? It won't, you know.
Okay. I'm going to ask you something that I've, you know, for as long as I've known you, you've been doing this, and I've never commented on this. When you're playing, especially when you're soloing, sometimes you'll start making these kind of guttural, like humming kind of things.
Yeah.
And so, no, it's really interesting. So, how does that aid your playing? Does that help you in like your?
I don't know I'm doing it.
So
I
you
don't know I'm doing it.
Okay.
No, folks. Yeah, no, it's something that I do where when I'm playing, I make noises.
Yeah.
And I don't know I'm doing it. I'm really not aware that I'm doing it.
But it's interesting because it almost seems like it adds a breathing quality to your playing because
I don't know.
So
I don't know, but
okay.
I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
It's because it's been brought to my attention many times, and it drives some people crazy.
Really?
Because I mean, usually I'm playing so dang loud that
people don't hear it.
you can't hear it.
Yeah.
But like in the studio, people would hear it
Yeah.
and stuff like that, or like I'm sitting close to you when I'm playing.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I don't know what that is. The more and more, and especially kind of in the space that I'm in right now, as I said, like I've done I've played music and played the type of guitar that was incredibly dexterous and very difficult.
Yeah.
And very technical, I guess you can say. In my version of technical, anyway. It's nothing compared to friends of mine that really know what they're doing. But to me, having really approached the instrument from that, trying to really kind of hold my own, playing really difficult music that's physical and really, you know, is fast and hard, and trying to just play, not necessarily simple, but just to emote, just to purely emote, and do that with no preconception. Man, you know, just for me, that's so much harder. It's so much harder because to just play and let out what you're doing, you got to be so confident and so comfortable with yourself. That's a really hard thing to do. And I think it's easier to play more complicated or something that's more technical because there's almost a safety in once you got it, you got it. And it's like there's almost like I'm hiding behind it, so to speak. Whereas if you're going to play raw, or if you're going to, it's harder. It's because it's more vulnerable. And that's the thing about really, for the first time in my life, because, you know, all these records, I had them when I was a teenager or even younger. You know, these people I keep talking about, you know, that I'm really kind of off into at the moment. And I heard it and I liked it, but it didn't touch me as much as it touches me as an older person because it's not kids' music, man. It's mature. It's men's music. I mean, not to be, you know, macho about it, but it's music that is meant for.
It's adults.
It's adult music, you know, and it's about nuance, and it's cool and it's fun, but it ain't flashy necessarily. And it's just the older I get, I mean, as I listen to these guys that had so little vocabulary on the instrument, yet they said so much, and it's just, to me, that's just amazing. Because it's just so harder to do that, you know? But in a way, the other thing that's funny that I've found is that the more you learn on the instrument, the harder it is to play truthful, because you have all these fancy words that you can use to kind of misdirect, you know?
Yeah.
And so, you know, for me, trying to distill where I'm at in my playing life, it's just trying to distill it down to the simplest hopefully, just talking statement, taking a breath, and trying to play with the most feeling that I can. And if I don't have something to say, maybe just take a second until I got something to say, and that takes maturity, because the younger you are, the more apt you are to talk, and then talk, and look at this and look at that, and it's just like, there's a thing to this stuff, and I just love it. It just begins and ends with what I like, and I love it. It turns me on.
Yeah. JD, thank you so much for coming back out.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be back.
Yeah. And be watching for your solo blues record that'll be
it'll be out later this year.
And then you'll be watching out for the dates you'll be playing with the Phil Lesh and Friends. Yeah,
I'm doing my first show with them in the middle of this next tour up in San Francisco. No pressure.
Yeah.
Which I'm really looking forward to because it's a huge honor. I'm a huge Dead fan, and like I said earlier, Luther Dickinson and I have become good buddies, and old Luther, got my foot in the door. So it's up to me to keep that door open or have it slam on my foot. So it's up to me from here on out. But I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thanks, JD.
Thank you, Zach. Love you, pal.
Okay.